So, I've always created moody sci-fi scene in Blender, but what about Unreal Engine? How can you achieve the same kind of result but in real time, without having to wait until the next day to see the final render and instead get it in just a few minutes or even a few seconds? In this video, I'm gonna show you the steps to create this kind of result using Unreal Engine. So it all started in Blender. I was having fun by creating some kind of sci-fi structure by kitbashing assets. I wanted to see how long it will take to build this kind of complex structure using only the kitbashing workflow. It took me around 30 minutes, and once the model was done, I wanted to actually do something with it. So I thought, why not integrate it into a full scene? I've been using Unreal Engine for years, but until now, I had never really taken the time to create a moody scene like the ones I've made several times in Blender. So I set myself the goal of recreating this kind of look in Unreal Engine, and seeing how far I could push the realism with Lumen and with the help of plugins if needed. Let's start by unwrapping this model, then jump into Unreal Engine. They offer several templates, depending on the type of project you want to create. But most of the time I use film, video and live events and start with a blank project. After that, you just need to name your project and you're ready to go. Once I'm in Unreal, I start by duplicating the main level and remove the default lighting because I usually prefer using the Ultra Dynamic Sky plugin. I switch to Cinematic and let's push the cloud coverage all the way up. Once FBX is imported from Blender, let's see how it looks inside Unreal Engine. Alright, let's give him a rusty metal texture. Since I've been using Unreal for years, I've built up my own library of advanced materials. That allows me to quickly apply those materials to pretty much any model, and then tweak it easily inside the material instance if needed. For this model, a single material is more than enough. I didn't bother splitting the mesh into multiple materials, because based on the composition I had in mind, I already knew it would mostly be used as a background silhouette and not as a highly detailed asset meant to be seen up close. Now, let's create a new landscape. I want something fairly large, so I'm going with 127. Since I created this model in Blender without any scale reference, it's time to get a better sense of how large this machine is by importing a mannequin into the scene. I'm also going to use that mannequin to help position my character properly. Now I create a new folder in my content browser. I usually name it Cinematic, give it a color so it's easier to spot, and then create my level sequence inside it. Next, I add a new camera inside the sequencer, and start looking for an angle that matches the composition I had in mind. Now it's time to place the mannequin and create a simple blockout, just to get a first idea of where the character will be, but also to get an overall sense of the shot. Using the sculpt tool, I start adding elevation to the landscape to give it more shape and make it visually more interesting. Now I can keep refining the blockout a bit more while also adjusting the camera. For this environment, I wanted a cold and apocalyptic atmosphere with volcanic rocks, so I went into Quixel Megascans to look for the assets I needed for this. I already know I will need cliffs along with different types of rocks that I can later scatter across the landscape using PCG. Once the assets are imported, I can bring them into the scene and start placing them based on my blockout. Inside Ultra Dynamic Sky, I also start setting up the fog, making sure that volumetric fog is enabled. And honestly, at this stage, there is no right or wrong setting. The main thing is to experiment, play with the sliders, and adjust everything based on the look and atmosphere you want for your scene. I also realized that I forgot to log the exposure on my scene, so I fixed that now. Now I can start working on the lighting by placing lights behind the vehicle to enhance the silhouette effect from the camera's point of view. And at that point, I thought adding another vehicle in the background could give the shot a bit more depth. Here, you can see the lights I placed for my lighting. I also added 3 red point lights around the vehicle to bring some warmth to an otherwise dark and cold environment. Now, here's a simple PCG setup I created to scatter my Megascans assets across the landscape. I'm using a mix of medium-sized rocks and larger boulders to create more variation in the shape and ground detail. I choose to use PCG because it gives me a lot more flexibility. I can change the shape of the landscape at any time and the assets will automatically adapt. I can also play with the seed and generate different variations until I find one that works best visually. Now it's time to add some motion, starting with the camera. Here I'm keeping it very simple, a linear forward camera move with just 2 keyframes, one at the beginning and one at the end of the timeline. And I want the frame rate to be set to 24 FPS. Let's also animate the vehicle in the background. Now that the environment and lighting are almost finished, it's time to move on to the character. Here, I simply use the character from an asset pack I bought a while ago. I then export it as an FBX from Blender and head over to Mixamo to grab a base animation that we can refine later inside Unreal Engine. Once the animation is imported into Unreal, I will be able to create a control rig based on the Mixamo skeleton. Having a control rig is really important for animation, because it makes everything much easier when it comes to adjusting pose or refining the movement later on. To create my control rig, I simply right-click on the skeletal mesh, then go to Create, Modular Control Rig. After that, I just drag in the different models that match the character skeleton. You need to start with the spine, then move on to the rest. Shoulder for shoulders, leg for legs, you get the idea. Sometimes the models can appear extremely large, but that's easy to fix by simply scaling them down. Once everything is set up, you can check that the control rig is working properly. Next, I add the skeletal mesh to the timeline, then copy the mannequin's position. From there, I can select the skeletal mesh in the timeline and assign the animation to it. The pose didn't look quite right on that spiky rock, so I switched to a different asset with a flatter surface to place the character more naturally. Much better. Now let's talk about animation. Here I want to bake the animation into the control rig I created earlier. To do that, I simply right-click on the skeletal mesh, then choose Bake to Control Rig. Here is it. The pose changed slightly, but that's not a problem, we can fix it pretty easily. Here I don't want to change the base animation, I just want to adjust the pose, so I add an additive layer. Set a keyframe on the first frame, then I can begin working on the pose from there. For the snow effect, I used the Easy Snow plugin. I really like this plugin because it gives me a result that looks realistic very quickly and it's also easy to use. I will also leave a link in the description if you want to see in more detail how to use this plugin. Let's customize the character a bit to give him some story and make him visually more interesting. I thought about a survivor wandering through an apocalyptic world overrun by machines, carrying a radio on his back as he searches for signs of human life. In Blender, I created the backpack using the same kit bashing approach to save time. And since the character is fairly far from the camera, I don't need to push the details too much here. I also thought it would be cool to add a small screen on the back with scrolling data, as if the radio was constantly picking up and collecting information in real time. So I also separate the screen into its own material. Back in Unreal, I import the backpack into the scene, then parent it to my character. When I attach it to the character, the scale changes, but that's not an issue. I can simply adjust it manually until it feels right. Now let's quickly assign some basic materials. I choose this raising hand pose because I also wanted to add a cane for him to hold. Same idea as with the backpack, so I'm going back into Blender to quickly create this cane. If I parent the cane to the same way I did with the backpack, the whole object will just follow the character's hand, which is not what I want here. What I want instead is for the character to hold the upper part of the cane, while the bottom stays planted on the ground. To fix that, I add a bond directly inside Unreal to create a structure between both ends of the cane. Once the cane is properly positioned with the character, I can then bind the hand of the bone at the handle of the cane. To add more natural movement, I animate the cane with a bit of noise, and since the hand is linked to the handle, that motion also transfers to the character, which helps make the animation feels more alive. Okay, now that the animation is in place, it's time to add some cloth simulation. As soon as wind is involved, a long code instantly makes the shot feel more epic. But for that, I first need to export all my elements from Unreal Engine. I start by exporting the character animation, and then also export the backpack and the cane. To do that, I duplicate my sequencer, pick all the elements in that version, and then export everything as FBX files. Once everything is ready, I jump into Marvelous Designer to create the clothing simulation. First, I import the character animation, then the cane, and finally the backpack. To save some time, I simply reuse some clothes I had created from a previous project. The base shape is still pretty simple, but I do need to modify the back to create an opening for the backpack to come through. When I start working with wind in Marvelous Designer, I usually use the pin tool to keep certain parts of the clothes attached to the character. That helps prevent the clothes from behaving too unpredictable when I run the simulation. Once the simulation is recorded and exported from Marvelous Designer, I import the Alembic file into Unreal Engine. Then I bring it into the scene and assign a material to it. Now that all the main elements are in place, I can start polishing the scene and making the final adjustments. Let's go back to the idea of adding an animated screen to the backpack, because I had already prepared the UVs for this. Inside DaVinci Resolve, I import the UV image so I can use it as a visual guide. After that, I bring in a coding video I found online, and position it roughly where the screen UVs are located. That way, once I'm back into Unreal Engine, I can use that video as an animated texture for the backpack screen. Then I set up a simple material instance so I can easily tweak the brightness, color, and other settings. To play the video, I add a media track to the timeline. I select the video's media source, then the media texture. And after a few final adjustments, the scene is ready for rendering. For most of my projects, I use EXR, and here are the rest of my render settings. Once my image sequence is rendered, I always do a color grading pass in DaVinci Resolve. It's a stage I really enjoy, because it lets me quickly explore different moods and choose the one that works best for me. I also like to create a vertical version that I can use for social medias. And that's it. That's how I created this shot in Unreal Engine. I hope you find this video helpful, and if you did, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.